This is Edward Siegel. Welcome to the Crisis Ahead podcast. Each week, we look at how companies, organizations, and individuals in the news are responding to, managing, or recovering from a crisis, and what you can learn from their successes or failures. My observations and recommendations are based on my experience managing crisis situations and advising others on how to respond to and bounce back from disasters, scandals, and other emergencies. My guest today is Jeffrey Davis, Managing Partner and Leader of the Baltimore office of Van Eperen, an integrated communications agency headquartered in Rockville, Maryland. But before I bring him on, I want to say a word about the messages companies and organizations convey in a crisis. An important aspect of crisis communications is to have a strong and consistent message about your disaster, scandal, or other emergency. Do not allow the people who represent your company in a crisis to say different things to different audiences at different times for different reasons. Unless everyone is on the same page, you run the risk of confusing people and worsening the crisis. The consequences of having contradictory messages has been on full display lately, thanks to the mixed messages about the pandemic being sent by the Trump administration. Some White House officials refuse to wear masks, while others recommend that the masks be worn. A few government representatives warn of the dangers of failing to adhere to social distancing guidelines, but others encourage people to attend public events where social distancing is impossible. The results of these mixed messages are unfortunate, but not surprising. Daily coronavirus infections were breaking new records. Hospitals were close to reaching full capacities, again. The average age of new coronavirus patients dropped by about 15 years compared with only a few months ago. When you have to deal with a crisis, what kind of message will you send about it? Will your message be consistent, clear, and help put the crisis behind you? Or will what you say, how you say it, and when you say it make matters worse? I've written a new book that provides important advice on how you can prevent, manage, and recover from a crisis. Crisis Ahead: 101 Ways to Prepare for and Bounce Back from Disasters, Scandals, and Other Emergencies. Crisis Ahead is now available as a paperback book wherever books are sold and as an ebook from Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Crisis Ahead is filled with case studies about how companies and public figures have prepared for and handled crisis situations, and the important lessons you can learn from their successes and failures. The book also includes checklists and exercises to help you get ready for and react to a crisis. You can learn more about the book at publicrelations.com. It's not too early to start preparing for the next crisis. That's because history shows there is always a next crisis, and the sooner you are ready for it, the better. My guest today is Jeffrey Davis, Managing Partner and Leader of the Baltimore office of Van Eperen, an integrated communications agency headquartered in Rockville, Maryland. Jeffrey has more than 25 years of experience in positioning and reputation management, particularly in media relations, media training, crisis communications, and social media. Thanks for joining me today, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me.
Even though a company may have a crisis management plan in place, they could have some issues or challenges accessing the plan when they need it. What steps can organizations take to guarantee that they will always have immediate access to their plans?
Well, I have an interesting story that kind of led to my offering that this is an idea for clients, a mobile version of a plan. It was a number of years ago with an energy client. There was an earthquake, if anybody remembers, on the East Coast, and everybody was evacuated. And our client was on the sidewalk on Pratt Street in Baltimore, and one member looked at the other and said, "Where's the crisis plan? We need to get some information out there." And the other associate said, "Well, it's on the 11th floor." And if you think about it, you don't. The first thing you don't do is grab a 3-ring binder and rush out of a building. Just you're going to grab your keys and your phone, and that's probably it. So, and when I think about where I've been when that call comes in, I've been on the sideline of a daughter's field hockey game. I've been at the mall. I was once driving back from dinner when I got, quote, that call. So what I did with this client is once we got through this crisis, we decided to come up with a system where you can condense the big, bulky 3-ring binder version of the crisis plan into something accessible on an iPhone. So that's, envision like a long scroll, maybe, many feet long, and you can scroll through your phone, and many clients will store those on Dropbox or a secure way to access it. But it basically is a band-aid and shows you, what are the first steps to do, who are the team members, who does what when, template statements, current contact information, and access to social media passwords. That's what you need, in the moment, and then you can regroup and go to the binder.
Have you put this idea into use?
Yeah, I always I'll either with a client say, let's update your standard crisis plan, and while we're at it, let's convert it into a version that's accessible. I don't think you should do one or the other, but I do recommend that now. This client also, on this original energy client, we created what they call a wallet card, and it was just a real simple version, paper version, to carry in your wallet with the most basic, first step instructions.
What's involved in creating these portable, more accessible crisis plans?
Our firm does design, and this is much deeper than just a standard crisis plan. But so there's a lot of design into it, and also converting it into a format that can be scrolled essentially. It's colorful. It doesn't look anything like a traditional plan. It's color coded and very visual, and it's gotten a lot of good reviews.
Media relations and media training are always important, of course, but even more so when a crisis strikes. Are there any stories you can share about companies who needed help dealing with the media while they were trying to manage a crisis?
Well, as you state, when is your next? There is going to be a next crisis, so you always need to be preparing yourself. But when it happens, it's there's no warning. And so one example that comes to mind is the deadly apartment explosion. At an apartment complex in Silver Spring, Maryland, where 7 people were killed, 65 sent to the hospital. It was a very bad situation, and eventually the National Transportation Safety Board investigated it, and it was one of their most complex investigations to date. So, and it was a gas explosion, and how you would never no idea this is going to happen, and the media attention to this was just incredible. So a couple things. They had an ad agency that started off with the managing the case with them, but soon, maybe in a day, they realized they needed some crisis communications, traditional PR help, and we were brought in probably a day later. The other thing that happened was the media was all over it, obviously, but our spokesperson really had not had media training, or at least a refresher recently. So we had to, on the spot, give basic media training so they would be more comfortable with the fielding all of these calls. And they were tough questions. It was especially from the TV reporters. These people have died. Do you feel responsible for that? Questions like that you don't want to have to field on the fly, but you definitely need to have some prep and some experience fielding those questions in your conference room before you're live with a reporter in front of you. The other thing, the residents were mostly Spanish speaking, and so we immediately had to convert, or not convert, but have every communication we did bilingual. So we had a blog that we posted in 2 languages, so we could keep everybody up to date on what's happening. And communication was just extremely important when this happened, and it was unrelenting. Intense media scrutiny. We had 2 or 3 people on our team at all times, monitoring, responding, promptly correcting misinformation. So it's not anything you can wing or do if you just aren't familiar with the steps.
Based on that experience, what lessons can others learn about working with the media and the importance of getting media training sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I advise do refreshers twice a year. You should have a full blown media training program for anybody who's going to be speaking to the media, but don't just do it once and say, oh, we did that 2 years ago, we're fine. No, you need to practice. So I that's number one. The other one, two other things that hit me during this instance was, if you don't speak to the media, someone else will do that for you, and it likely won't be accurate, and it definitely won't be your messaging. So in this case, the media was interviewing people, bystanders and people walking past the scene, and we didn't get to have our spokesperson out there until they were ready. So that's the other lesson. And then finally, and we've all heard it in crisis communications, a crisis is not over until the public says it is. So you can't say, great, done, we put out our statement, we're finished here. No, you have to wait until they say, okay, we're done. So in this case, it led up to a NTSB hearing and legal proceedings, and it went on and on for several years, and we had to wait until it was concluded in the public's view versus when we would deem it over.
In a previous episode of this podcast, Richard Levick said that, quote, intelligence is key, unquote. What are the latest available tools organizations should be using so they are not surprised by a crisis?
Well, this is changing all the time. We all know the importance of social media monitoring to learn what critics are saying, to assess public sentiment, help you shape your communications. I've done this for clients, over the years, where you tap into their Twitter, you tap into Facebook groups, and you're aware of the public sentiment, and that's important. Goes without saying, you would follow the media as well, but this is changing rapidly. So TikTok is the latest tool that communications professionals need to be on top of, because the younger audience, they are out there, and that's in addition to Snapchat and Instagram. TikTok is their tool of choice, and they're filming interactions all the time. The so-called Karen outbreaks, they're at the protests with their phones, and they, believe it or not, on TikTok you can see an on the screen, on the street views of what's happening in these protests. And an example that really hit home earlier this month or last month was President Trump's rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on the Juneteenth weekend. If you recall, his campaign team was reporting all the widespread interest in the free tickets to the event. It was in the millions, and they had planned for an overflow venue as well. And however, the day comes, and we all know there were 6,200 scanned tickets for the arena with 19,000 seat capacity. Well, what happened, this was reported by the New York Times, but I also watched this myself because I'm a very close watcher of TikTok. The users on that platform shared video tutorials showing how to sign up for tickets using fake names, the old fake names we've all heard over the years when you had a substitute teacher or whatever, any kind of a joke name, and a fake email address. And the campaign registered those as all this intense interest, but these TikTok users had no intention of going to the event, and the results showed. And there's been a lot of mainstream stories about that. But if you were tapped into what's going on TikTok, you may have been tipped off to this, because I watched their actual tutorials on what to do with it. And then I'm seeing something new in the past few weeks, similar tutorials showing how to go to the campaign websites and purchase merchandise. And what they're doing is, and they show you what to do. You go to a campaign website, and you load up your shopping cart with $6,000 worth of merchandise, and then you abandon. You leave it on, and you just move on. And what happens is it shows items are selling out, and can't be accessed by others when they have no intention of completing that purchase. So things like that are happening on TikTok. You can't abandon, the tried and true media coverage and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but watch TikTok, because that's where there are a lot of activist activities taking place.
Is it possible for an organization to protect themselves from being a victim of TikTok?
I think the only thing I can say there is, from Richard Levick's intelligence is key, is to take advantage of that intelligence and take a counter action. So, all these people are signing up for these tickets, and look at, Mickey Mouse is one of the people. And maybe have your IT team, alerted to that, to say, be on the lookout, because for these phony registrations. So there's not much you can do in terms of stopping it, but the awareness and the intelligence is what you need to take action on.
My last question for you today is this, Jeffrey. What can you tell us about your agency, and where can people go to find more information about it?
Yes, Van Eperen, we're an integrated communications firm led by former journalists, so that is a differentiator. So it really helps us understand, the critical steps taken in media relations and crisis communications. But in addition to that, we do advertising, digital marketing, full creative, social media strategy, own media content development. So that's a full service firm, but with that strong journalistic foundation. If you want to learn more, www.vaneperen.com. You could search for me on LinkedIn, Jeffrey Davis, and I'll follow you back, and we can have a discussion. And also Twitter, my name on Twitter is Contact Jeff, and I will follow you back, and we can have a DM discussion.
Thanks. My guest today has been Jeffrey Davis, managing partner and leader of the Baltimore office of Van Eperen, an integrated communications agency headquartered in Rockville, Maryland. Thanks again, Jeffrey, for being my guest on this episode of the Crisis Ahead podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Crisis Ahead podcast. Remember, it's not a matter of if companies and organizations will have a crisis, but when.